Major League Baseball has introduced new rules for the 2023 season, generally to speed up the game. In this video, I'm going to talk about the new rules and the impact that I think it'll have going forward. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me on my channel, Brutus on Baseball. Today's video is going to be all about the new rules Major League Baseball has instituted for the 2023 season and going forward. There's a lot of chatter about these rules, and I wanted to give my own take about my opinion of what I think of these new rules and what I think the impact on the game will be. Most articles I've read split these new rules up into 3 general categories, but I think there's actually 5 new rules that are important to talk about here, and so that's how I'm going to talk about it today. The first one up, and the easiest one in my opinion to talk about, is the bigger bases. Now, what is this rule? Starting in the year 1877, around the time the National League was first formed, bases were standardized at 15 inches on each side. That rule is being changed this year to make the bases 18 inches on each side, so a 3-inch increase for each side of the base. And why is this being done? Well, the main driver seems to be the reduction in injuries that this would cause. A bigger base means more surface area for the fielder and the runner to be able to share that base, whether it's a ground ball play at first base with the runner running through, or maybe a slide play at second base, third base. Other impacts that this rule change might have, though, is that there's likely to be a lot more safe calls on close plays, whether it's a runner running out a ground ball and he makes it to the bag a little bit faster, because that bag will be slightly closer to home plate. Or on a double, triple, or maybe a stolen base, when a runner has a lot more space to be able to reach his hand or his foot into the bag, and the fielder now has to reach his glove farther to reach him. This will have the effect of increasing offense throughout the league at least a little bit, and probably stolen base attempts as well. But I'm not sure how big of an impact this will have on a regular basis. To me, this one is an easy one to support. I like this new rule, especially if it reduces the number of injuries happening to our favorite players out there. Rule number 2 to talk about, this one's a little bit deeper, is the pitch clock. Throughout the history of the game, pitchers have been able to essentially take as long as they want to pitch the ball each at bat. But starting in 2023, that's going to change. With no runners on base, a pitcher has to start his windup within 15 seconds of receiving the ball, or with runners on base within 20 seconds of receiving the ball. Now, what's the why driver behind this? Well, Major League Baseball wants to reduce the time it takes to play each baseball game. And they see how much time is taken up by pitchers between each pitch when it's happening. And that really slows down the pace of the game. They want to attract new fans, and a lot of the new fans, as we all talk about, have shorter attention spans. So baseball needs to figure out a way to get their attention and keep it, and that is not going to happen with a really slow-paced baseball game. Testing in the minor leagues in recent years, even AAA last year, showed that having the pitch clock reduced the time in a baseball game by up to 20 to 25 minutes. Now for the how. Well, the pitch clock is started when the pitcher receives the ball back from the catcher. The hitter has to be in the batter's box and fairly ready within 8 seconds of the pitch clock expiring. If the hitter's not in the batter's box and showing that he is fairly ready to hit, then he will be charged with an automatic strike. Now, if the pitcher does not start his motion, start the windup or going from the stretch by the time the clock expires, then the batter will automatically get a ball in his at-bat. Umpires will be able to use some discretion here when the pitch clock starts, or when the pitch clock may need to be delayed. Some examples of this: if an outfielder has to make a really long run to get a foul ball and he has to go into the stands or something like that, the umpire is probably going to give him more time to get back to his position. Or sometimes a catcher, when he's up to bat, ends the inning getting the 3rd out, and he's got to go put on all of his gear. So the umpire is probably going to have a delay in the start time of the pitch clock then too. And then of course there's the injuries. Sometimes catchers get hit in the mask or other parts of the body that can really hurt, or a batter might take a swing or foul off a ball from his foot and get a little bit hurt. So the umpire is probably going to give a little bit of extra time for those players to get back into playing condition. My opinion on this one: I generally like the idea of speeding up the game, and I think that this is going to have a good impact. The only concern that I have is how this is going to impact close and late situations, especially coming to the postseason. The kind of drama that's created with a really close 1-run game in the 9th inning, or a Game 7 that's coming down to the wire, I don't want to have to worry about what that pitch clock says, and I definitely don't want the game to be decided because of pitch clock violations. That just sounds really bad to me. My hope is that Major League Baseball does not continue this rule into the playoffs, where game time probably is a little bit less important because of the heightened intensity of the games. But we'll have to see how it unfolds through the year and what they decide come October. Now, quite closely related to the pitch clock rule is another new rule about pickoffs and pickoff attempts. Starting in 2023, a pitcher will only be able to have 2 disengagements from the mound per at-bat. What is a disengagement? Well, it's a pickoff attempt where he throws over to first base or maybe third base, or a fake pickoff move, or even just stepping off the rubber. They do this a lot to keep those base runners honest, keep them closer to the back. And that's not going to be able to happen nearly as often this time around in 2023 because the pitcher will only be able to do it twice per at bat. And what happens after he's done it twice? Those base runners know that he cannot throw a pickoff attempt again. So they're going to feel a lot more liberal about taking those extra leadoffs, getting a jump start on a hit, or stealing bases. And why is baseball instituting this new rule? I think it's directly related to the pitch clock rule. Again, they don't want the game to really drag out. They want to speed it up, and having a lot of pickoff attempts will really slow down a game. But in addition to that, if they give unlimited disengagements from the mound, unlimited pickoff attempts or stepping off the rubber, then the pitcher is just going to do that every time the pitch clock is about to expire. So baseball has to have some regulation on the number of disengagements per at bat. If a pitcher disengages a third time or a fourth or a fifth, then a balk is called, and any runner that's on base will be able to move up automatically an entire base. So this is a pretty important new rule. This new rule is going to have a huge impact on the running game, which is pretty consistently what we're seeing here throughout a lot of these rule changes. If those really good runners know that the pitcher is limited in what they can do in pickoff attempts, or that they've already used the 2 that they have, a lot of those guys are going to take off way more often, especially with those bigger bases and a higher likelihood of being safe anyway. Now, I love this rule, and I'm worried about this rule a little bit too. I love the rule because anything that brings the running game back into baseball, I think makes it way more exciting. The stolen base has decreased decade over decade, and I would love to be able to bring back those 1980s when I grew up that had Vince Coleman and Ricky Henderson constantly stealing bags. Those were fun baseball games to watch. On the other hand, I am a bit worried for the pitchers because this could have a significant impact on their game. We'll just have to see how it plays out, but I'm very interested in watching this one unfold in 2023. The 4th rule that I want to talk about is defensive shifts. Baseball is eliminating the defensive shift starting in 2023. This is bringing baseball back to the days when there were 2 infielders on each side of the infield. The third baseman and the shortstop on the left side, and the first baseman and second baseman on the right side. The rule for 2023 states that it has to be that way again. There has to be 2 infielders on the left side, 2 infielders on the right side, with second base being the line between the 2. In addition to that, all 4 of those infielders have to have both feet on the dirt to start each pitch, so they can't be fooling around in the outfield grass at all. Why is baseball doing this one? Well, I think it's to really increase offense again, and not just the overall number of runs per game, but the variety of offense. Baseball has become this 3 true outcomes game where it's either a strikeout, walk, or home run a lot of the time. And baseball really wants to bring back the manufacturing of runs, getting singles, moving runners over, stealing bases, scoring runs without having to hit a home run to do so. And this is definitely going to help with that. If a fielder is found to have a foot on the wrong side of second base or in the outfield grass, one of 2 general things will happen. Either the play can be nullified, so whatever happened has to be replayed, and the batter gets an extra ball added to his count. Or whatever did happen, if the hitting team really likes the result, so let's say he got a hit or a home run, the hitting team can choose to keep that result, sort of like declining a penalty in football. They say, no thanks, we'll take the actual result that happened and stick with whatever we got. My opinion on this one, in general, I love this new rule. Shifts were instituted in the last decade or 2 because the really smart people at the top of baseball running these teams figured out that you could play defense in a different way to really be able to head off a lot of hitters' sweet spots where they hit the ball. So guys that pull the ball constantly, you'd move all your fielders over to that side, so it was really hard for them to get base hits. But what this does, it allows baseball to go back to its roots a little bit, back to needing athleticism to be able to play the game. You have a position on the field and you have to be there in that general position. And if a ball's hit in a difficult spot, you've got to have the speed and athleticism to go get it and make a play. This really dulled the game of baseball when the second baseman was way out in the right field grass, or the third baseman was right up the middle. And those plays no longer were exciting because a ground ball up the middle meant that you were most likely to get an out. Now, I'm not in love with this rule because of some of the details. It is still allowed for teams to shift their defensive players. You just have to have 2 guys on the right side of second base and 2 guys on the left side of second base. But you can still shift your players as close to second base as you want. So ground balls up the middle will still be outs more than anything else. It does allow for some more athleticism to be important in the game, but not enough in my opinion. I would actually love it to see if they had some sort of wedge-shaped area behind second base that no one could be allowed in. That way a ground ball up the middle, which really is a good hit right on the nose of the bat, straight back at the pitcher, that should be allowed to be a hit when a hitter hits the ball that well. And I'd love to be able to see the shortstops or second basemen have to make that diving catch and throw to be able to get those guys out in the future. But that's not how we did it for this year. Who knows, maybe Major League Baseball will consider adjusting it in the future, but for now, this is what we've got. There's also not going to be a rule about shifting outfielders. So in theory, you can actually shift your outfielders as much as you want in any direction and leave a huge gap open in the outfield. I've heard some rumors that there's teams considering putting 2 guys in the outfield gaps and then 1 in short right field, still basically playing the shift for a lot of these guys that are pull hitters, and it'll make them hard to get base hit line drives to short right field. But that does at least allow for a large gap in center field, left field for those players to be able to hit the ball to the opposite field. But as we all know, it's not so easy to just hit the ball the other way just because you want to. You have to be an elite hitter to be able to do that. The 5th rule that I'm going to talk about briefly is the ghost runner at second base. Major League Baseball kind of slipped this one in, but what happened here is that baseball instituted a ghost runner rule in extra innings. So a new runner put automatically at second base to start every half inning once a game reaches extra innings. They did this to speed up the games and shorten them a little bit so the teams didn't have to worry about using their entire roster, especially pitchers, during a season in which there might be a lot of players on the injured list because of COVID. They kept it last year as well because they were worried about having pitchers really mess up their arms coming back from only a short season and playing a full season in 2022. But now they decided to keep it going forward. The why? Because it makes it easier for travel to not have these really long extra inning games, 16, 18, 20 innings. And it really reduces the wear and tear on pitcher arms, so the teams don't have to worry so much about how to strategically use the bullpen. Major League Baseball has decided to keep this rule despite a lot of dislike by fans of the game. And I have to admit, I'm one of those too. I don't care for this rule. I completely understand it has really helped to shorten games and speed up the finishing of extra innings. And I know too that owners and players really like this new rule too, because who wants to play a 5 or 6 hour marathon ball game into the middle of the night and then get straight on an airplane to fly to the next city for a game the next day? I get it. As a baseball fan though, I just don't like the idea of introducing a runner that shouldn't be there just because it's extra innings. Now that being said, pretty much every sport out there, once it reaches an overtime or an extra innings type scenario, there are automatic rule changes to try to finish that game as quickly as possible. And there's no reason that baseball should really be any different than those. But baseball has never subscribed to this way of thinking. Extra innings are played just like every other inning out there. And changing that now really is something that rubs me the wrong way. And I think the reason why is because it's just made it too easy to score in the extra innings. There have been so many extra inning games that once it goes into the 10th, it doesn't go beyond that. Or it's so easy for every team to score a run. There's 1 run scored in the top of the 10th, the bottom of the 10th, top of the 11th, bottom of the 11th. It's made it into a game where once you reach extra innings, you really try to get the 1 run across the plate and hope that you can stop the other team from doing the same. And that changes the dynamic of the game completely. Out of all the rules, this is the one I don't like. Sign me up for all the other ones, but just not this one. But I understand we're probably going to have to accept this because if the owners, Major League Baseball, and the players all like it, they're the ones deciding how the game looks. The last thing that I'm going to cover in this video is who I think will either benefit or suffer from all of these new rule changes. Well, the first one is really easy. The athletic guys. The guys that can run, that can hit, that can field, that can do it all. Their game is going to be way more valuable now. And in addition to that, guys that can steal bases on top of those skills. So think guys like Trey Turner, a shortstop who can actually hit, but steal bases really well too. Ronald Acuna Jr. is another one that comes to mind. Even guys like Cedric Mullins and Randy Arozarena. Those guys are guys that can do all of it pretty well, and the value that they bring to their teams is only going to increase because of these new rules. And then, of course, there's the guys that hit into the shift all the time. Obviously, we can point out guys like Kyle Schwarber or Joey Gallo. Gallo may be one of the best signings by the Minnesota Twins this year with these new rule changes, and we'll see perhaps he has a career resurgence in 2023. But it goes way beyond just these heavy pull hitters. Corey Seager is actually a guy that could have the biggest impact by the elimination of the defensive shift. In 2022, Seager hit a ground ball into the defensive shift 182 times, and he only got a base hit 25 of those times for a 132 batting average. Imagine if there was no shift, or at least allowed for a lot more space for his ground balls to go through a hole. Some prediction tools that look back say that he would have gotten at least 20 to 25 more hits last year than he did with the defensive shift in place. And what does that mean? Instead of a 245 batting average, he would have hit 277. And his overall game would have been much more respected in his first year in a Ranger uniform. The guys who will suffer the most? Obviously, the pitchers. With the rule changes in the last couple of years about using foreign substances on the baseball, and now all of these rules for pitch clock, limiting pickoffs, and eliminating the defensive shift, I wonder how many pitchers are really going to have a game that suffers because of all of this stuff that's happened. I expect offense to get a huge boost, and not just home runs, but in the manufacturing of runs as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see ERAs ballooning in 2023. And when you look at the pitchers that are most likely to be impacted, it's really interesting to see who the slowest workers are. Usually it's a relief pitcher, guys that come in the ninth inning in a really close and late situation, and they take as much time as they want to deliver each pitch. Guys like Devin Williams, Kenley Jansen, Aroldis Chapman, those guys are some of the slowest workers in the game. But it's not just the relievers. Corbin Burns and Shohei Ohtani are two guys that work really slowly in 2022. And it'll be interesting to see how they can adjust to this new sped-up game. In addition to that, there's going to be new rules about windups too, going into a pitcher's delivery, because they have to know when a pitcher has violated the pitch clock, and that depends on when he started this windup. But a guy like Luis Garcia specifically has a really funky start to his windup where he takes several steps. So when do you really start that? And so Major League Baseball has also instructed the umpires to start ruling on balks a lot more strictly in 2023. So guys like Luis Garcia will not be able to continue with his windup that he's used to. There's going to be a number of guys having to learn a new windup going into spring training, and who knows how they're going to respond. Thanks for joining me in my rundown of the new rules for the 2023 season. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below. I'll be sure to answer them. As always, like, subscribe, check out my other videos. All of this stuff will help me to really get my videos out there to more and more people, and I would really appreciate that. Until next time, just remember, baseball season's coming. Enjoy spring training, take care of yourself, and keep talking baseball.